Over the last week, I've been using the iPhone 8 as my main phone. Today, I decided to talk about the specifications of the phone and review them to let people know if it's worth buying. This is the iPhone 8 specs video. Hello everybody, my name is Matt and this is Real World Review. What I'm going to do is go over the specs of the phone, and at the end I will score the phone based on my personal experiences as a user and cell phone repairman. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments section or on Twitter at MattofRWR. Let's get started. To start, our first category is the outside hardware. The first thing you notice when seeing the front of the phone is the display. The display is a 4.7-inch IPS LCD that is LED backlit. The screen resolution is 1334 by 750, totaling 326 pixels per inch. The screen ratio is 1400 to 1. The display is a wide color display P3, which allows you to see more accurate colors when compared to a standard IPS LCD. The screen also has dual domain pixels, which helps produce better viewing angles. The screen brightness is 625 lux, making it the same brightness as the iPhone 7. The phone does support True Tone display, which I'll explain later. The glass does have an oleophobic coating on the front that makes it fingerprint resistant, and the glass is the strongest glass ever put into a smartphone, according to Apple. And display zoom and reachability are available on this phone. Hopefully this won't be the last generation to support reachability. There is more to the front of the device than just the display. The top portion houses one of the two speakers and doubles as an earpiece. Above that is a proximity sensor as well as the ambient light sensor. In this phone, the ambient light sensor was upgraded to help with the True Tone display. There is a microphone, one of the 4 on this device, hidden next to the earpiece that is used for Siri and dictation. The front camera is a 7-megapixel sensor, just like the iPhone 7. On the bottom portion is the second generation of the new home button that does not click. It uses Apple's Taptic engine to emulate a click, although it still doesn't feel like the button clicks. The button also functions as a fingerprint scanner, which Apple calls a Touch ID. This phone has the same second generation of the Touch ID that the iPhone 7 has. On the bottom of the device is 12 circular holes and 1 oval-shaped hole. On the left side there are holes for the second of the 4 microphones, while on the right the holes are for the second speaker and the third microphone. In the middle of these holes are the only 2 screws on the outside of the device. I would say that this keeps the phone together, but the very strong adhesive that goes around the display and the frame seems to be more effective. In the direct middle is an 8-pin lightning jack that supports USB 2.0. Note that there is no area for a headset jack. Again, on the right side of the device is a power button along with the SIM card tray, which are both made out of metal. On the left side of the device is a ring/silent rocker and a volume up and volume down buttons, which are also all made out of metal. And on the top there is nothing at all. Again. On the back of the device is a sapphire camera lens, the 4th microphone which is used for video recording and speakerphone calls, and a quad LED True Tone flash with slow sync. The back is all glass just like the iPhone 4 and 4S, with the camera flash and the Apple logo being under the glass. The sides are made out of Series 7000 aluminum. Yes, the same aluminum that Apple has used since the iPhone 6S. As for the size, the device is 138.4mm tall, 67.3mm wide, and 7.3mm thick, or 5.45 inches tall, 2.65 inches wide, and 0.29 inches thick. As for the weight, the iPhone 8 is 148 grams, or 5.22 ounces. Yes, this does mean that the phone is slightly bigger than the iPhone 7, but will fit almost all of those cases. The phone is still water resistant with the IP67 certification. Nothing has changed in this section. Now that we are done with the outside of the device, let's move on to the cameras. The rear camera is a 12-megapixel sensor with a quad LED True Tone flash. The camera is a backside illuminated sensor. Other information about this sensor is that the aperture is f1.8, focal length is 28mm, camera sensor size is about 1/3 of an inch, and the pixel size is 1.22 micrometers. This phone also has a hardware optical image stabilizer for still videos and photos, along with a 6-element lens. The camera is capable of many software features like capturing raw image, touch to focus, along with autofocus, which is done by focus pixels, face and body detection, live photos, a 3 or 10-second timer, digital zoom of 5 times, HDR or high dynamic range, burst mode, panorama up to 63 megapixels, and geotagging. Nothing changed from the iPhone 7 other than the slow sync in the iPhone 8's True Tone flash. As for video recording, this phone has many different options. You can record 4K at 24, 30, or 60 frames per second, 1080p at 30 or 60 frames per second, and 720p at 30 frames per second. Slow motion can also be captured at 1080p at 120 or 240 frames per second. While recording, you can digitally zoom up to 2 times, and the phone can support time-lapse video. This phone also allows for continuous autofocus when recording and allows you to zoom while watching videos in the Photos app. The front camera is a 7 megapixel sensor that is backside illuminated. It allows for 1080p recording, which is assumed to be at 30 frames per second, and the aperture is f2.2. Just like the back camera, it has many software features like body and face detection, auto stabilization, burst mode, exposure control, 3 or 10-second timer, HDR, and retina flash. It should be noted that this phone still does not have autofocus or focus for that matter. This all sounds very familiar so far. Well, let's move on to the next category, which is the inside hardware, starting with the processor. The processor in this phone is a 64-bit A11 Bionic chip with an M11 Motion coprocessor. It is a 10nm hexacore processor, 2 being high-powered Monsoon cores, and 4 being low-power Mistral cores, that run at 1.97 GHz according to Geekbench 4, although there is speculation that it does run up to 2.5 GHz. Geekbench gives the phone a score of about 4,160 for the single core and 10,000 for the multi-core test. Yes, 10,000. The GPU is a tri-core chip made by Apple. Little is known about this chip other than Apple claims that it is 30% faster than the iPhone 7. When testing the GPU, Geekbench gives a score of about 15,572. This phone has 2GB of RAM, while the iPhone 8 Plus has 3GB of RAM. The model I'm reviewing is the A1863, and in this case is factory unlocked. The phone supports 1G, 2G, 3G, and 4G, assuming that the markets that you're in still support it. And the LTE bands are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 12, 13, 17, 18, 19, 20, 25, 26, 28, 29, 30, 38, 39, 40, 41, and 46, which are the same as the A1864, A1905, and A1897 models. Note that the A1905 and A1897 do not support CDMA and will not work on Verizon or Sprint, according to Apple. As for the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, the Wi-Fi chip is the 802.11abgn AC with MIMO, and the Bluetooth is version 5.0. This phone also supports GLONASS, AGPS, Galileo, and NFC. The battery is a 1,821 mAh lithium-ion cell, which is smaller than the iPhone 7. And yes, it is still missing the headset jack, so that can't be the reason why they went with a smaller battery. Regardless, the battery lasts all day, and Apple claims up to 13 hours of video playback, 40 hours of audio, 12 hours of internet use, 14 hours of talk time, and 10 days of standby time. Note that Apple does not post the standby time, but it does post that the battery lasts about the same as the iPhone 7. No, this is not a joke. The phone does support fast charging, but will require a 29-watt USB-C charger along with the USB-C to Lightning cable. Yes, that will cost you $75 just to fast charge your iPhone 8, 8 Plus, and 10. The phone can also charge wirelessly and will accept the max of a 7.5 watt charger. There are many software features that Apple added into iOS 11, and here are just a handful of noteworthy features. All new App Store. The notification shade has been updated and is essentially another lock screen. Siri has a new voice that actually sounds natural.
Apple.com should be able to answer that question and more.
The live filter selector has been redesigned. The Photos app now supports GIFs, although it is not as good as some jailbroken devices. Apple Maps has been updated to support inside maps for major places like malls and airports. There is finally a file manager, but don't get too excited for it yet. I'll just say it's not perfect yet. As for audio playback, it supports AAC, MP3, Apple Lossless, AIFF, WAVE, and finally FLAC. As for video playback, it supports HEVC, H.264, .mov, .m4v, and .mp4 files. My name is Matt, and this is Real World Review. It also supports Dolby Vision and HDR10. With the specs of the phone explained, let's score the phone and decide if it's worth the purchase. Note that this phone costs $699 for a 64GB version and $850 for a 256GB version. It should also be noted that this phone is 2 weeks old and most people will be buying this phone new, and the scoring does account for that. Let's start with the frame. It is aluminum on the sides, but the back is made out of glass. This isn't an issue, but it does make a large portion of the phone easier to break. The headset jack did not make a comeback this year and most likely will not come back. As for waterproofing, the only seal on the phone that I can find was in the SIM card tray and around the home button. The adhesive around the display may wear out in the future and make it possible for some water to get in when submerged. This shouldn't be the case, but #Splitgate proves that the adhesive will not keep the phone together under stress. The home button does not have a compressor just like the iPhone 7, so it should never stop clicking, however it is still glass. When the home button cracks, the customer cannot replace the home button at all and is required to go to Apple or through their carrier's insurance. I have not worked on the home button on the iPhone 8, but on the iPhone 7 they did block the changing of the home button. On the iPhone 6 and 6S, when the home button broke, it could be replaced, but the Touch ID would never work again. This may be on purpose or an accident, but either way it is disappointing from a repair standpoint. It is hard to tell how well the frame will hold up, but I do know that the glass is probably just as fragile as any other glass. I forgot to mention that the iPhone 8 does have stereo speakers just like the iPhone 7, but I can't tell the difference in sound between either phones. Apple claims that the iPhone 8 has deeper bass and is 25% louder. It is proven to be louder, but maybe they meant up to 25%. Anyways, I will give the outside hardware an 8.25 out of 10. Hey, I enjoyed the glass back and the fake space gray. Next is the screen. To me, the screen is really small. I was using a phone with a 5.2-inch screen, and coming back to this phone size is odd to get used to. It is still a very nice screen, but it is getting old. Just like the iPhone 7, the issue that I ran into is the fact that this phone is made in 2017, and the first 1080p phone was made at the end of 2012 by HTC called the Droid DNA. I mean, look, Apple is using the LCD equivalent of the Samsung S3 screen in 2017. Sure, the iPhone 8 Plus has a 1080p screen, and the iPhone 10 will have a similar footprint with a much larger screen, but, well, I guess this phone is supposed to be at the lower end of the newer phones. To be fair, the screen does not look washed out, has amazing viewing angles, and is pretty bright, but I'm not satisfied with paying $700 for a 720p screen on anything. True Tone is supposed to make the colors look accurate, but it just puts a yellow tint on my screen. I really don't understand why this was even added, and it should not be the reason for someone to buy this phone. Even though this is pretty much the same screen as the iPhone 7, I will give the screen a 6.5 out of 10. Half a point off because it's still 720p. Next is the inside hardware. Now this is obviously the fastest iPhone out, and the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus only differ performance-wise with the amount of RAM that is given in each phone. While the battery is not horrible, it could be better. Apple decided to put a battery that is 139 milliamps smaller than the iPhone 7, or a 7% decrease. It seems Apple doesn't understand that customers want a bigger battery and a faster processor, not a smaller battery and a faster processor. I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to me. The performance of the phone is awesome, and the score is only affected by the confusing decrease in battery life and poor space management on the inside, giving the inside hardware of this phone a 7.75 out of 10. Next is the camera. The camera still lacks professional features like changing the ISO, white balance, and focus point manually. With this said, the camera is awesome and can record 4K at 60 frames per second without killing your storage. That is crazy. The camera stays the same as the iPhone 7 with a 9 out of 10. Like I've said before, the software will change and won't go into the final scoring. The phone does come stock with iOS 11, with iOS 11.1 in beta at the time of this video. I'm already noticing some lag, and I've had a few crashes with this phone, so I'm scared of what Apple will do to the software in the future, but I am skeptical. The Geekbench scores lead me to believe that this phone will last through at least 4 years of software updates. There are some pretty cool software features, and Siri now sounds like a human. I'm hating the way that Apple set up the notification shade. I thought Apple did it right with iOS 8 and iOS 10, but I feel like it was ruined on iOS 11. Who knows? Maybe they'll see this video and change it. The control center has been updated and looks a lot nicer than it used to. Since the OS changes all the time and can be modified, I will not put this in the scoring along with the rest of the phone, but I will still give it a 7.5 out of 10. That control center is pretty dope. The last score is whether the iPhone 8 is or isn't future-proof. Like all other iPhones, the phone lacks not only USB-C, but also USB 3.0. USB 3.0 doesn't sound like a big deal, but you're wrong. The backup size on my iPhone was roughly 65 gigabytes, and the music took about 35 gigabytes, totaling 100 gigabytes. The entire transfer took over an hour just to start using my phone after I switched from my 256 gigabyte iPhone 7. Another thing is that I will be recording 4K at 60 frames per second on this phone, and it will take a long time to transfer it to my computer. USB 3.0 is not mainstream yet, but Apple should get ahead of the curve. They have USB 3.0 on the iPad Pro, so why don't they make it for the iPhone 8? The lack of USB-C is not a huge deal, and it makes sense why Apple didn't add it onto this phone, but I feel like it should be adopted in the next couple of years. The smaller battery is disappointing. As the battery gets older, it will drain a lot quicker than other phones. Why Apple and Samsung like to put smaller batteries into devices is beyond me, but this trend needs to stop. At least keep the same size battery. Stop going smaller. No one wants that. The software is a factor in the future-proofing score, but this phone should be fine. It is a powerhouse when it comes to the processor and should be able to handle any software thrown at it over the next couple of years. With this said, I'm not too sure about 4 years from now. It is assumed that this phone will depreciate dramatically, seeing that there is a high demand for the iPhone 8 Plus and an outrageous demand for the iPhone 10. I predict that this phone will be worth about $270 to $350 by the end of October of 2018. With all this said, I still believe that the iPhone 8 is future-proof and receives a 7.5 out of 10. It does support wireless charging and will expand the market dramatically. Oh, and fast charging, but at $75. Overall, the score of the specs of the phone is 39 out of 50, or 78. Now this isn't a bad phone. Also, I did not expect the score to be the same as the iPhone 7, but I realized that it should be. The price seems too high at $700. I did say with the iPhone 7 that it would get an 8 in the future proofing for making the base model a 64GB version, but Apple did raise the price, so it will get half a point for that. Like I've said before, one day Apple will be able to make the perfect phone, but it won't be for a long time. I hope they did with the iPhone 10, but I have a feeling that I will be disappointed again. And that's it. Let me know what else you want me to review in the comment section below, and I have a question for you guys. Do you care about wireless charging or True Tone anything? Let me know. Thanks for watching.